They say you can smell the holidays before you even open the door. The scent of cinnamon, roasted turkey, and the warmth of a home that loves you back. But when I stepped into my house that Thanksgiving afternoon, the air felt cold. It felt thin. There was no music playing, no laughter coming from the kitchen, and no smell of a feast in the oven. Just a heavy, suffocating silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Mark," I called out, my voice echoing off the hardwood floors. "I'm home. I know I'm late. The traffic was a nightmare, but I've got the pies." No answer. I set my bags down on the kitchen island. The counters were spotless. Too spotless. Mark had promised to handle the prep while I ran to my mother's to drop off her medications. We had been married for 7 years. And while things hadn't been perfect lately, we had agreed that this Thanksgiving would be our fresh start. But as I walked through the house, I realized the start he had in mind wasn't with me. I walked into the bedroom and my heart dropped. The closet doors were wide open. His suits were gone. His shoes, his luggage, even the watch box on the dresser, empty. My breath hitched in my throat as I saw a single envelope on my pillow. It didn't say "I'm sorry." It didn't say "I'll call you." It just said "I can't do this anymore." But as I stood there, shattered, clutching that piece of paper, I heard it. A low, raspy groan. It wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from the guest room down the hall, a room we never used. I pushed the door open, my hands shaking. I expected a burglar or maybe Mark hiding in shame. Instead, I found a man I barely recognized, lying in a rented medical bed, surrounded by monitors that hummed like a death knell. He looked like a skeleton draped in translucent skin. This was Arthur, Mark's stepfather. The man Mark had told me died years ago. The man he said he hated. There was a note taped to the ivy pole in Mark's handwriting. "He has 2 weeks left. I've paid the nurse for today, but after that, The first 48 hours were a blur of tears and rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pack my own bags and leave Arthur there to fend for himself. Why should I care for the father of the man who had just destroyed my life? Mark had calculated this perfectly. He knew I was a nurse. He knew my heart wouldn't let me walk away from a suffering human being, even if that human was connected to his lies. As I sat by Arthur's bed that second night, the anger began to shift into a cold, hard clarity. I started looking through the medical files Mark had left in a messy pile. That's when the first layer of the lie peeled away. Arthur wasn't the monster Mark had described during our marriage. "Water," Arthur whispered, his eyes fluttering open. They were cloudy but kind. As I helped him sip through a straw, he looked at me with such profound sadness. "You're Sarah," he wheezed. He told me, "You were the one who wanted me gone." He said, "You wouldn't let him bring me home unless he gave you all my savings." I froze. The room felt like it was spinning. "What did you say, Arthur?" Slowly, over the next few days, the truth poured out of that dying man like a confession. Arthur had been a wealthy man. He had a small estate, a life insurance policy, and a house in the city. Mark had convinced Arthur that he was terminal much earlier than he actually was, moved him into a private facility, and began siphoning off his money. Mark told Arthur that I was the greedy one, that I was the reason they had to keep him hidden. Mark hadn't left because he couldn't do it anymore. He left because Arthur's bank accounts were finally dry. He had spent his stepfather's life savings on a mistress and a luxury condo in another state, and he'd left the burden of the actual dying process to me. The betrayal was so deep it felt physical. Every "I love you" Mark had said was funded by a dying man's stolen legacy. Every vacation we took was paid for with the comfort Arthur should have had. I watched Arthur's frail hand reach for mine, and in that moment, my heartbreak transformed. The woman who walked into this house, a victim, was gone. I looked at Arthur, this man who had been betrayed by the son he raised, and I realized we were both survivors of the same predator. "He thinks he won, Arthur," I whispered, stroking his hand. "He thinks he left us with nothing, but he forgot one thing. He left me with the keys to the truth." I spent the next week documenting everything. I called the bank. I called the lawyers. I found the trail of transfers Mark thought he had hidden. While Mark was likely sipping champagne on a beach, I was building a case. Arthur passed away peacefully 6 days later on a quiet Tuesday morning. His last words weren't for Mark. They were for me. He thanked me for showing him that not everyone in the world was like his son. He signed the final document with a shaky hand, a document that Mark never saw coming. 2 weeks later, the revenge wasn't a shouting match or a public scene. It was a cold, legal, silent strike. Mark returned to the city briefly to try and sell our house. His name was on the deed, after all. He showed up with his new girlfriend, looking tanned and refreshed, expecting to find me gone and the house ready for the market. I was waiting in the living room with my lawyer. "Sarah, you're still here?" Mark said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "Look, I know it was hard, but Arthur is gone now. You need to move on. I'm listing the house tomorrow." I didn't cry. I didn't even stand up. I just pushed a folder across the coffee table. "You aren't listing anything, Mark," I said calmly. "I filed a massive civil suit for elder abuse, fraud, and embezzlement. I have Arthur's testimony on video. I have the bank records showing you stole his medical funds. And because you used our joint account to hide the stolen money, you've implicated yourself in a way that makes this house mine as part of the settlement." His face went from tan to a ghostly, sickly white. The girlfriend looked at him, then at the folder and back at him. She saw the monster he was before I even had to say a word. "You can't do this," he stammered. "I'm his son." "You were his predator," I replied. "And now you're a man with no house, no savings, and a very long list of people at the district attorney's office who want to speak with you." The police arrived 10 minutes later, not for a crime of violence, but to serve the injunctions that froze every penny he had left. He was escorted out of the house he tried to steal, leaving with nothing but the clothes on his back, the same way he had left me and Arthur. As the door clicked shut, the silence in the house was different. It wasn't cold anymore. It was peaceful. I learned something that Thanksgiving. Betrayal is a fire that can either turn you to ash or forge you into steel. Mark thought he left me with a burden, but he actually gave me a gift. He gave me the chance to provide dignity to a good man, and in doing so, I found my own. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the quiet sound of